My name is Renata Ortega. I'm 31 years old. I own a construction company. I have 19 employees, 68 completed projects, and a crystal trophy sitting on my office shelf that catches the afternoon light and throws rainbows across the wall. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. 5 days before Thanksgiving, my mother called to tell me not to come to dinner. Not because of a fight, not because I did something wrong, not because of a scheduling conflict or a family emergency or any reason that would make sense to a normal person. Because my brother Emilio asked her to uninvite me. He said my job would embarrass him in front of his new girlfriend. I'm a general contractor. I build homes. I manage crews. I show up to job sites at 6 in the morning with sawdust in my hair and concrete dust on my boots. I carry a tape measure clipped to my belt and a clipboard with schedules that cost real money when they slip. Emilio works at a large bank in downtown Charlotte. He wears a suit. He talks about portfolio optimization and quarterly performance reviews and his company Amex card with its $15,000 limit. My mother said, "You understand, don't you, honey? It's important to Emilio. This girl might be the one." I said, "I understand." I didn't tell her what I actually knew. I didn't tell her about the award. I didn't tell her that in 5 days, everything she thought she knew about me would shatter in front of 300 people in a hotel ballroom 40 feet from where she'd be sitting. They didn't know that the construction worker they were ashamed of had just been nominated for Contractor of the Year, and what they were about to find out would make them realize their biggest mistake wasn't uninviting me to Thanksgiving. It was never asking what I'd built in the first place. The call came on a Thursday evening in November. I know it was Thursday because Thursday was never a calling day. We talked Sundays, and even then, it was usually brief. A check-in. A box ticked on both sides. I had just walked in the door from a job site in Eastwood. A bungalow renovation. Original hardwood floors we were refinishing by hand. Crown molding we were restoring piece by piece. My Carhartt jacket still smelled like sawdust and polyurethane. There was drywall dust on my jeans and a blister forming on my right palm from carrying 2x4s all morning. I was tired the way you get tired after a good day of real work. The kind of tired that sits in your shoulders and your lower back and feels almost like satisfaction if you let it. I set my keys on the kitchen counter and saw my mother's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, sweetie." Her voice had that careful tone, the one she used when she was about to say something she didn't want to say. Like the time she told me my grandfather was sick. Like the time she explained very gently that they couldn't loan me money for my first truck because they were worried about the risk. That voice. "How are you?" "Good. Just got home. What's up?" A pause. I heard her take a breath. "So, Thanksgiving," she said. "We need to talk about Thanksgiving." I set my keys down and stood still. "Emilio's bringing someone this year," she continued. "His girlfriend, Sophia. It's the first time he's introducing her to the family, and he's nervous. He wants everything to go smoothly." I waited. "He asked if maybe this year it could just be the 4 of them. Immediate family, you know, him, Sophia, me, and your father. Keep it small, intimate, less pressure." "I am immediate family," I said. "I know, honey. I know, but Emilio feels like he just wants to make a good impression. And he's worried that..." "Worried that what?" Another pause, longer this time. "He said your job might be a little awkward to explain to Sophia." The words landed like something dropped from a height. Not a slap, more like the sound of something hitting the floor that you can't unhear. "My job," I repeated. "He didn't mean it that way, sweetie. Sophia is very professional. She works in design. Emilio's trying to present a certain image, and he's worried that..." "What did he say, Mom?" "Exactly." She hesitated. He said you're a construction worker, and Sophia's family is very traditional, and he doesn't want her to think we're, She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "Blue collar," I said. "Kira, don't..." She stopped, caught herself. "Renata, don't be like that." "Is that what he said?" "He just wants everything to go smoothly. This girl might be the one. So I'm uninvited," I said. "It's just this year. Next year. It's fine, Mom." "Renata, I understand," I said. "Thank you for calling." I heard the relief flood into her voice before she could stop it. "Thank you for being so mature about this, honey. I knew you'd understand. We'll do something. Just us. Another weekend. Maybe brunch." "Sure," I said. We said goodbye. I hung up. I stood in my kitchen, still wearing my jacket, still smelling like pine resin and dried sweat, and I looked down at my hands. There was grime under my fingernails, a callus on my right index finger from holding a pencil against blueprints for 10 years. The blister on my palm had started to sting. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there in the quiet of my kitchen and thought about the fact that I was 31 years old, and my family had just asked me not to come to Thanksgiving because my job made my brother uncomfortable. And then I thought about the email that had arrived 2 months ago, the email I hadn't told any of them about. The email that began, "Dear Ms. Ortega, on behalf of the Charlotte Home Builders Association, we are pleased to inform you that you have been nominated for Contractor of the Year under 35." I took off my jacket and hung it by the door. The fabric was stiff with dried sweat and construction dust. My work boots sat beneath it, scuffed and salt-stained from walking concrete floors in the cold. This is who I am, I thought. And then, in 5 days, they're going to see all of it. The pattern started a decade ago. I was 21 years old, sitting at the kitchen table in my parents' house in South Charlotte, the same table where we'd eaten Sunday dinners my entire childhood. The kind of table that has seen every version of your family, all the arguments and the celebrations and the ordinary meals that blur together over the years until the table itself starts to feel like a person. My father, Adrian, was reading the newspaper. My mother, Valeria, was doing the crossword. My brother, Emilio, 13 months younger than me and already enrolled in the business program at UNC Charlotte, was texting someone on his phone with the focused energy of someone conducting important negotiations. I said, "I'm not going back to community college. I'm enrolling in trade school." My mother's pen stopped mid-letter. My father looked up from the sports section. "Trade school," my mother repeated. Not a question, a diagnosis. "Carpentry and general contracting," I said. "I start in January." The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds. It felt like an hour. My mother set her pen down slowly, the way you set down something fragile. "Diana's daughter just got into the pre-med program at Duke," she said. "Linda's son is starting his MBA in the fall." Not "that's interesting." Not "tell me more." Not "why do you want to do that?" Just, other people's children are doing better things. My father folded his newspaper with the careful deliberateness of a man choosing his words. "Renata, that's hard work. Physical work. You're a smart girl. You could—" "I want to build things," I said. Emilio looked up from his phone. "You're going to be like a construction worker? Seriously?" My mother reached across the table and touched my hand. "Honey, we just want you to have an easier life than we did." She meant it. I understood that even then, at 21, with the stubbornness of someone who had already decided and was only announcing rather than asking. My mother had been a secretary at a law firm for over 2 decades by then, answering phones, managing calendars, watching men with half her intelligence and twice her ego get promoted past her year after year. My father had spent his career in logistics at a furniture distributor, good steady work, the kind that doesn't make you rich but keeps the lights on and puts 2 kids through decent schools. They had worked hard. They had pushed Emilio and me toward college, toward white-collar jobs, toward what they called respectable careers. They wanted the elevation they hadn't had. They wanted us to be seen differently than they had been seen. I understood all of that. What I said was, "This is what I want." My mother smiled, the smile that meant she was disappointed but didn't want to fight. "Well, we'll support you, of course." Support, I learned, has conditions. Over the next 10 years, my parents asked Emilio about his job every single Sunday. Everyone. "How's the bank? Did you get that promotion? What's your 401k match looking like? Are they sending you to the conference? Did you hear back about the team lead position?" They asked me, "How's work?" Not "what project are you on?" Not "what are you building?" Not "how's the company?" Just "how's work?" The way you ask someone how the weather is. Polite, disinterested. A box to check before moving on to Emilio's quarterly review. When I got my general contractor's license at 24, I told them at Sunday dinner. My mother said, "That's nice, honey," and asked Emilio if he'd heard back about his promotion. When I started my own company at 26, Ortega Build and Design LLC, registered with the state, official letterhead, $2 million in liability insurance that made me nauseous to write the check for. I told them at Sunday dinner. My father said, "That's a big step." My mother said, "Just be careful, honey. Small businesses are risky." Then she asked Emilio about his dental benefits. I stopped bringing it up after year 2. I stopped waiting for them to ask, but I kept building anyway. By year 5, Ortega Build had completed 68 projects. We employed 19 people. Last year, we brought in over $2 million in revenue. I personally cleared $195,000 after payroll and expenses. Emilio made $72,000 at the bank. But every Sunday, my mother asked him about his job. And every Sunday, she asked me, "How's work?" Let me tell you what they didn't ask about. Let me tell you what was happening while they were asking Emilio about his Amex card and his team lead position and his company conference in Atlanta. Year 1. I registered Ortega Build and Design, LLC, on a Tuesday morning in May. I was 26 years old. I'd spent the previous 3 years working as a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm, learning how to read blueprints at a level most people on site couldn't match, learning how to manage subcontractors, learning how to talk a client down from the edge when a permit got delayed or the tile they'd chosen went on back order for 6 weeks. I knew I was ready before I admitted it to myself. I bought a used white Dodge Ram for $38,500, paid in cash from 4 years of saving. I had the company logo put on the door. Simple, clean, no frills, just the name and a phone number. I paid $4,800 a year for liability insurance and spent the first month checking my bank account every morning with the specific anxiety of someone who has just bet on themselves and isn't entirely sure they should have. At Sunday dinner, I told them, I started a company, Ortega Build and Design, residential renovations. My father looked up from his mashed potatoes. Your own company? Yes. That's a big step, he said. Just be careful, my mother said. Most small businesses fail in the first 5 years. I know, I said. Emilio glanced up from his phone. So you're like a contractor now? Do you have employees? Not yet, just me. He nodded, already scrolling again. Cool. My mother turned to him. Emilio, did you hear back about that team lead position? And just like that, we moved on. Year 2. By the end of my second year, I had completed 14 projects. Small work, mostly. Kitchen remodels, bathroom renovations, a sunroom addition in Myers Park that came in 4 days ahead of schedule and $800 under budget. That sunroom got me a 5-star Google review. That review brought in 3 more clients. I hired my first employee, Derek Paulson. He was 42 years old, a Finnish carpenter who had spent 2 decades doing residential work and could make a piece of crown molding fit a crooked Victorian ceiling with an accuracy that looked like magic. He was the best trim carpenter I'd ever seen, and I knew within a week of working with him that I was lucky to have him. At Sunday dinner, I mentioned it. I hired someone. His name's Derek. He's a carpenter. That's great, honey, my mother said. That's really great. Then she asked Emilio about his department restructure. Year 3. Year 3 was when I landed my first 6-figure contract. $120,000 for a full gut renovation of a 1920s craftsman bungalow in Eastwood. Original hardwood floors, original windows, a kitchen that hadn't been updated since the Ford administration. The clients were a couple in their 50s who had bought the house specifically because of its bones and wanted every one of those bones preserved. I was terrified. I was also more ready than I'd ever been for anything. The project took 4 months. We came in on time and $8,000 under the projected budget. When I handed the clients their keys, the woman, Linda, a retired teacher with very particular opinions about subway tile, cried. Not little polite tears. The real kind. The kind that catch you off guard and embarrass you a little. She referred me to 2 of her friends within the month. By the end of year 3, 6 employees. Revenue just under $900,000. At Sunday dinner, the company's doing well. My mother, that's wonderful, honey. My father, just make sure you're saving for retirement. Emilio, the bank just approved me for a company Amex, $15,000 limit. My mother, Emilio, that's amazing. Year 4. I hired a project manager, 2 more carpenters, an electrician, a part-time bookkeeper named Susan who had the organizational instincts of an air traffic controller and saved me roughly 4 hours of administrative work every single week. I moved out of my apartment and bought a house in Plaza Midwood. 1,400 square feet, needed work, which for me was part of the appeal. I renovated it myself over 6 months. New kitchen, new bathroom, refinished floors. Every wall repainted. I paid $218,000 for it. After the renovation, it appraised at $295,000. My parents came to see it once. My mother walked through the kitchen and said, "It's very modern." My father looked at the refinished hardwood floors and said, "You did all this yourself?" They didn't stay long. Year 5, the present. Ortega Build and Design is projected to bring in $2.8 million in revenue this year, 19 full-time employees, 8 active projects running simultaneously, 68 completed projects in our portfolio with an average client satisfaction rating of 4.9 stars across every review platform we're listed on. Our biggest project to date is a $340,000 historic home renovation in Myers Park. A house built in 1912, original structure, original details, coffered ceilings, pocket doors, plaster walls with profiles that haven't been manufactured in 60 years. The clients, Tom and Linda Ashworth, want every original detail preserved while completely updating the electrical, the plumbing, and the HVAC. It's the most technically demanding project I've taken on. It's also the most beautiful. For that project, I needed a designer. Specifically, I needed someone who understood period-appropriate interiors at a level most designers don't bother to develop. Someone who knew the difference between a historically accurate restoration and a Pinterest approximation of one. Carol Brennan, a real estate broker I'd worked with across several projects, gave me a name. Sophia Hargrove, Carol said. She works independently. Historic preservation is her specialty. I've heard nothing but good things from suppliers. I sent an email on a Thursday morning in July. "Hi, Sophia. I'm Renata Ortega, owner of Ortega Build and Design. We're starting a historic renovation project in Myers Park, $340,000 scope, and I need a designer with deep experience in period-appropriate interiors. Carol Brennan recommended you. Would you be available for a call next week? R. Ortega, owner." She replied within 2 hours. "Renata, I'd love to discuss the project. Available Tuesday at 10 or Thursday at 2. Looking forward to connecting. Sophia Hargrove." We met at the site on July 12th. She arrived in a linen blazer and ankle boots carrying a leather portfolio. 28 years old, sharp, professional. She walked through the house with me for 45 minutes, taking notes, asking questions I hadn't expected. Which walls were load-bearing, whether we'd sourced a match for the original baseboard profile, if the pocket doors were salvageable, or if we'd need custom reproductions. Standing in the living room, looking up at the coffered ceiling, she said, "I love this project. This is the kind of work I got into design for." "Good," I said, "because I need someone who cares as much as I do." We signed the contract 2 weeks later, $28,500 for full design services on the Myers Park renovation. She didn't ask to meet me in a formal office. She didn't ask about my credentials beyond what was on the contract. She saw R. Ortega, owner on the email signature, and that was sufficient. On site, I wore jeans and a work shirt and steel-toed boots. I carried a tape measure and a clipboard. I directed the crew. Sophia, showing up twice a week with her portfolio and her sample boards, probably assumed I was a site supervisor, maybe a project manager. It was an assumption people made regularly. A woman in work clothes on a construction site is rarely assumed to be the one signing the checks. She didn't ask. I didn't correct her. In early September, we were on site together reviewing the kitchen layout specs when Sophia mentioned, in the easy, casual way of someone making conversation, that she had started seeing someone. "That's great," I said, not really listening. I was looking at the cabinet elevations and trying to figure out if the upper cabinets were sitting 3 inches too high relative to the original ceiling height. "He works in finance," she said. "Downtown, actually, at one of the big banks." "Nice," I said. She didn't offer a name. I didn't ask. Professional boundaries, not my business. I was thinking about cabinet heights. I did not know, could not have known, that the man she was describing was my brother Emilio. I did not know that when Emilio talked about me to Sophia, he called me the family embarrassment. I did not know he told her I would never amount to anything, that I was jealous of his success, that I resented how far he'd come. I did not know that Sophia, when she heard construction worker, pictured someone on a crew somewhere. Not someone signing her $28,000 contract. Not someone who had built a company from a single truck and a tool belt into a 19-person operation projecting nearly $3 million in revenue. They never asked, so they never knew. And that silence That decade of not asking, not looking, not caring enough to look closer was about to cost all of them more than any of them understood. 3 days before the award ceremony, on a Tuesday morning in late November, Sophia came to the Myers Park site to finalize the paint colors for the upstairs bedrooms. She had brought 8 sample cards, 8 different shades of white and warm cream, because historic homes require that level of specificity. What looks like white in a paint store looks like a completely different thing on a plaster wall under November light filtering through 100-year-old window glass. We were standing in the primary bedroom, holding the cards up to the window when her phone buzzed on the windowsill. She glanced at it and smiled. "Sorry," she said. "My boyfriend, he's excited about Thanksgiving." "That's sweet," I said. I was looking at the card labeled antique linen and trying to decide if it was reading too yellow against the original plaster. "It's his first time bringing me home to meet his family," she said. "He keeps saying they're low-key, which I'm pretty sure means they're absolutely not low-key." I smiled. "Families are complicated." "Yeah." She put the phone face down on the windowsill. "Anyway, I think the Navajo white reads better in here than the antique linen. It's warmer, more period appropriate." "Agreed," I said, and that was it. We spent another 40 minutes going through the remaining rooms. She left at noon. I stayed until 3, walking the site with Derek, checking the progress on the kitchen millwork. I did not think about the conversation again. I did not think about Sophia's nervous boyfriend or his low-key family or the Thanksgiving dinner she was looking forward to. 2 days later, my mother called and told me I wasn't invited. Thanksgiving morning, I woke at 5:30, same as always. The house was quiet and cold in the particular way of late November mornings, the kind of cold that has settled into the walls overnight and hasn't been pushed back yet by the heat kicking on. I made coffee in my French press, black, no sugar, and stood at the kitchen window watching the sky lighten over the neighborhood. 58 degrees outside. Clear. The oak trees in the yard were almost fully bare, their last leaves scattered across the grass like rust-colored confetti from a party that had already ended. It was Thanksgiving. I had nowhere to go. I thought about calling a friend. I thought about finding a restaurant that was open, sitting at the bar, ordering turkey and mashed potatoes like it was just a regular Thursday. For about 4 minutes, I thought about both of those things. Then I went to the bedroom, put on my work clothes, jeans, a thermal shirt, my Carhartt jacket, and drove to the Eastwood job site, the bungalow renovation. We were close to done. Just trim work left and a few final touches on the refinished floors. The clients wanted to move in by December 1st, and we were on track. There was no reason I needed to be there on a holiday. Nobody was paying me to be there. The site would be exactly the same on Friday morning. I went anyway. I parked in the driveway at 6:45. The street was completely silent. Every other house had cars in the driveways, people still asleep or just starting to move around their kitchens, starting their turkeys, brewing their coffee, calling their mothers. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house smelled like fresh paint and dried sawdust and the faint chemical sweetness of polyurethane curing. The floors caught the early gray light from the windows and held it, honeyed, smooth, better than new, because new doesn't have the depth that comes from 100 years of living compressed into the grain of the wood. We had done good work here, the kind that lasts 50 years without anyone noticing, which is the best kind. I spent the morning finishing the baseboards in the living room, caulking the gaps, sanding the joints, painting the final coat. Detail work, the kind that requires patience more than skill and a willingness to slow down when everything in you wants to call it close enough and move on. I don't believe in close enough. I never have. At 3 p.m, I sat on the front porch steps with a container of leftover Thai food I'd picked up the night before, $18.40 for pad see ew and spring rolls, and watched the sun angle through the bare trees at the end of the block. My phone buzzed. A text from Emilio. "Happy Thanksgiving." I stared at it for a long time. Not "wish you were here," not "I'm sorry," not even a question mark of any kind. Just "Happy Thanksgiving." Efficient, obligation fulfilling. A box ticked. I didn't reply. I finished my food, threw the container in the trash bag I'd brought, locked up the site, and drove home. The neighborhood was full of cars. Through lit windows, I could see the shapes of families gathered in living rooms, the warm blur of people who belong to each other visible from the outside the way those things always are when you're on the outside of them. I went inside, showered, put on sweatpants, sat on the couch with my laptop. I answered emails. I reviewed the schedule for the following week. I updated the budget spreadsheet for the Myers Park project, cross-referencing the millwork invoices against the original estimate and finding satisfyingly that we were still under projection. At 8:30, I closed the laptop and went to bed. I didn't feel sorry for myself. That surprised me a little. I had expected to. Instead, I felt something closer to its opposite, a stillness, a quiet that wasn't emptiness. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't sitting at that table performing for them. I wasn't watching my mother's eyes slide from me to Emilio the moment he mentioned something about his job. I wasn't answering how's work, with the summary calibrated to be exactly short enough not to bore anyone. I wasn't there, and I was fine. Better than fine, honestly. I was building something they couldn't see, in a life they hadn't bothered to look at closely enough to understand. And I didn't need them to see it. But in 4 days, they were going to see it whether they were ready or not. Tuesday evening, late November, the Ballantine Hotel and Conference Center. I pulled my white Dodge Ram into the back row of the parking lot at 6:15 and sat there with the engine running and the heat blasting, not quite ready to go in. The lot was already half full. I recognized vehicles, work trucks from other contractors, a few sedans that probably belonged to architects, a handful of luxury cars that would turn out to belong to the developers and the bank representatives who showed up to these things in their good suits because their companies wrote the sponsorship checks. I had been nominated for Contractor of the Year, under 35, for 2 months. The email from the Charlotte Home Builders Association had arrived on a Tuesday morning in September, and I had read it 3 times sitting at my desk in the back room of my house before I was willing to accept that I had read it correctly. Someone had submitted my name. The board had reviewed the submissions. I had made the final list of 3. I hadn't told my parents. I hadn't told Emilio. The only person I had told was Derek, who had hugged me so hard when I showed him the email that he actually lifted me off the ground, which, given that Derek is 6'2" and spent 20 years swinging a framing hammer, was not a small thing. Now, sitting in the parking lot in the dark with the heater ticking quietly, I felt the full weight of it settle onto my chest. This was real. I was here. I turned off the engine, picked up my purse, and walked toward the hotel entrance. I was wearing a black suit, well-fitted, bought off the rack 2 years ago and taken in at a tailor on Central Avenue. A white blouse, heels I had purchased specifically for this event and worn exactly once before, at a client presentation 6 months ago. My hair was down, straightened, falling just past my shoulders. I caught my reflection in the glass doors of the hotel entrance and stopped for just a second. I looked like someone else. Not the woman in steel-toed boots and a hard hat. Not the woman with sawdust in her hair and a tape measure clipped to her belt. I looked polished, professional. The word my family used for the kind of work they respected. I hated that I cared about that, but I did. I always had. I'd spent 10 years pretending I didn't. I pushed through the doors. The lobby was bright and loud, clusters of people in formal wear holding drinks, laughing, the particular energy of an industry event where everyone knows enough of the same people that the room feels smaller than it is. I checked in at the registration table. The woman behind it, 50s, reading glasses on a beaded chain, found my name on the list and handed me a name badge. Renata Ortega, Ortega Build and Design. Nominee. Good luck tonight, she said, smiling. Thank you, I said. I pinned the badge to my jacket lapel and walked into the ballroom. The room was enormous. Round tables draped in white linen, centerpieces of burgundy and gold flowers, a stage at the front with a podium and a large screen displaying the CHBA logo in clean navy and gold. The kind of room that makes whatever happens in it feel significant, whether it is or not. I found my table, table 12, the nominees table, and sat down. There were 5 other people already seated, 2 of whom I recognized from industry events over the years. We exchanged the easy conversation of people who share a trade, the usual talk about permit delays and subcontractor scheduling and whether the city's new inspection protocols were actually going to stick. Someone made a joke about the chicken. Everyone laughed. I opened the program booklet and turned to page 4. Charlotte Home Builders Association Annual Awards Gala. Contractor of the Year, under 35. 3 nominees listed. My name was the second one. I closed the program, set it back on the plate, and picked up my water glass. Across the ballroom, I did what I always do in large rooms. I scanned, not looking for anything in particular, just the habit of someone who has spent a decade managing job sites, always taking inventory of who is where and what is happening. That's when I saw them. Table 23, 40 feet from the stage, clear sightline, Emilio, my mother, my father, and Sophia. My hand stopped with the water glass halfway to my mouth. I set it down carefully. Emilio was in a navy suit, sitting with the particular posture of someone who wants to appear relaxed and isn't quite managing it. My mother, Valeria, was in a burgundy dress I had never seen before. She must have bought it for the occasion. My father, Adrian, looked uncomfortable in his tie in the way he always looked uncomfortable in ties, like a man who has worn them his whole adult life and never once made peace with them. And Sophia Hargrove, my designer, the woman I had hired in July, the woman who came to the Myers Park site twice a week with her portfolio and her sample boards and her precise, intelligent questions about original plaster profiles, was sitting next to my brother in a black cocktail dress with her hair pulled back, laughing at something Emilio had just said. I understood it all in a single second, the way you sometimes understand something you should have seen coming and didn't. Sophia's boyfriend, who worked at a big bank downtown. Emilio, who worked at a big bank downtown. Sophia mentioning Thanksgiving, a nervous boyfriend, meeting the family for the first time. Emilio asking our mother to uninvite me because my job would embarrass him. The woman sitting 40 feet away in the black dress, laughing at my brother's joke, was the same woman who had been on my job site 72 hours ago, holding paint sample cards up to November Light. She had no idea that the R. Ortega, owner whose email she answered and whose checks she deposited, was the sister Emilio had described as the family embarrassment. She had no idea that the woman in the steel-toed boots directing the crew at the Myers Park site was the same woman currently sitting at table 12 with a nominee badge on her lapel. Not yet. I turned back to my own table, set my hands flat on the white tablecloth, kept my face completely neutral. My heart was doing something complicated in my chest that I chose not to examine too carefully. The dinner service began at 6:45. I ate because I needed something to do with my hands. The chicken was exactly as rubbery as predicted. The mashed potatoes were decent. The rolls were the kind of dinner rolls that exist primarily to fill space on the plate. I ate methodically and kept my eyes on my own table, on the conversation happening around me, on the program booklet open beside my plate. From table 12, I had a clear view of table 23 if I chose to look. I chose not to look too often, but I looked. Valeria was charming Sophia. I could see it from 40 feet away, the particular warmth my mother turns on when she wants someone to like her. She touched Sophia's arm at one point, said something that made Sophia smile. My father was nodding along with whatever the conversation was. Emilio sat up straight, looking pleased with himself in the way people look when a plan is coming together. This was what he had wanted, what he had arranged, his girlfriend charmed by his family, his parents impressed by the professional connections that got them tickets to an event like this. His family, intact and presentable and appropriately white-collar, with no inconvenient sisters in work clothes to complicate the image. Nobody at table 23 looked toward table 12. Why would they? At 7:15, James Whitfield, president of the Charlotte Home Builders Association, mid-60s, silver-haired, the kind of man who has been comfortable in a room like this for so long that comfort has become indistinguishable from authority, stepped up to the podium. The room quieted. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Charlotte Home Builders Association Annual Awards Gala. We are so glad you're here tonight to celebrate the exceptional work being done in our community. Applause. He moved through the welcome remarks, the acknowledgments, the sponsor recognition. When he mentioned the bank, I saw Emilio straighten in his chair and glance at Sophia to make sure she'd noticed. We have a wonderful lineup of awards tonight, Whitfield continued, recognizing excellence in residential construction, design, and community impact. But we'd like to open with one of our most exciting categories, Contractor of the Year, under 35. And at table 23, Sophia sat forward slightly. She was a designer. This category was relevant to her world. Of course she paid attention. The people at my table shifted. Someone rested their hands in their lap. Someone else straightened their jacket. This award, Whitfield said, recognizes a contractor who has demonstrated exceptional growth, outstanding craftsmanship, and documented client satisfaction, all before the age of 35. This year's nominees represent the future of residential construction in Charlotte. The screen behind him changed. 3 names appeared in clean white text on the navy background. Daniel Hartley, Hartley Renovations; Renata Ortega, Ortega Build and Design; Sam Greenberg, Greenberg Custom Homes. At table 23, Sophia went still. I watched it happen from 40 feet away, the way you watch weather move across a landscape, the particular quality of stillness that precedes a change. She was looking at the screen with the focused attention of someone who has just seen something unexpected. Then she reached for the program booklet on the table, opened it to page 4, and read. I knew what she was reading. Renata Ortega, owner of Ortega Build and Design, has completed 68 residential projects in 5 years with an average client satisfaction rating of 4.9 stars. Her company employs 19 full-time staff and is projected to reach $2.8 million in revenue this year. Ortega is known for her meticulous project management and her commitment to preserving historic architecture. Sophia's hand went to her mouth. She turned to Emilio, said something, pointed at the screen. Emilio followed her finger, read the name, and the color left his face. Not gradually, the way it does when you receive bad news, but all at once, like a light switching off. My mother noticed. I saw her look at Emilio, then follow his gaze toward the screen. Her hand went to her chest, fingers spread flat against the burgundy fabric of her dress. My father turned, read the screen, and his expression went completely blank. The look of a man whose brain is processing something faster than his face can keep up with. At table 12, I sat perfectly still. Whitfield was still speaking. The criteria for this award include revenue growth of at least 150% over 3 years, exemplary and documented client satisfaction, and demonstrated community impact. This year's winner has not only met those criteria, she has exceeded them significantly. He paused. He was good at pauses. He'd probably been doing this long enough to know exactly how long a pause needs to be. He opened the envelope. This year's Contractor of the Year, under 35, is Renata Ortega, Ortega Build and Design. The room erupted. A spotlight found table 12. I stood up. My legs felt like water, but I stood, and that was all that mattered in that moment. That I stood, and that I didn't let anyone in that room see anything on my face except exactly what I chose to put there. The people at my table were on their feet. Derek wasn't there. He didn't have a ticket, but I thought of him anyway. Thought of that bear hug 2 months ago when I'd shown him the nomination email, and something about that made my legs feel more solid. I began walking toward the stage. The walk from table 12 to the stage ran along the main aisle of the ballroom. That aisle passed directly alongside table 23. I let myself look as I passed. 1 second, maybe 2. My mother's champagne glass was suspended halfway to her lips, completely motionless. My father's hands were flat on the table, his face still working through whatever he was processing. Emilio looked like a man who had just understood the punchline of a joke that was entirely at his expense. And Sophia was not looking at me. Sophia was looking at them, watching my mother's frozen champagne glass, watching my father's blank expression, watching my brother's face as the pieces assembled themselves in front of him. She was watching the Ortega family understand what Ortega Build and Design actually was, and I could see from the set of her jaw and the careful stillness of her posture that she was assembling pieces of her own. I climbed the stairs to the stage. James Whitfield shook my hand and handed me the award. Crystal, faceted, heavier than it looked, the kind of object that feels significant because it is significant, not because someone decided it should be. "Congratulations," he said, stepping back to give me the microphone. 300 people were looking at me. I took one breath, one full, quiet breath, then I spoke. "Thank you. This is an incredible honor." My voice came out steady, stronger than I felt. 5 years ago, I started Ortega Build with a truck, a tool belt, and a belief that good work speaks for itself. Today, we've built 68 homes. We employ 19 people, and we've proved that if you show up, do the work, and respect the craft, the rest takes care of itself. I paused. Let that settle. To everyone who believed in what we were building, even when it wasn't visible yet. Thank you. I stepped back from the microphone. The applause was louder than before. I walked off the stage carrying the award, returned to my table, accepted a glass of champagne from the person seated next to me, and sat down. My phone was on the table, face down. It buzzed. I turned it over. An unknown number. A text message. "We need to talk. Mom." I placed the phone face down again. Not yet. The cocktail hour began at 8 o'clock. The awards program was over. People stood, moved around the room, drinks in hand, the particular hum of an industry event settling into its second gear. I was talking to an electrical contractor I'd worked with on 3 projects when I saw my mother moving through the crowd toward me. She was walking fast, her purse held in front of her like she needed something to hold on to. My father followed behind her, slower, looking uncertain in the way of a man who knows a conversation is necessary, but hasn't yet decided what his role in it should be. The contractor read the situation, made a graceful excuse, and disappeared. My mother stopped in front of me. Renata. Her voice was controlled, tight at the edges. We had no idea you'd be here. That's correct, I said. My voice was calm, very calm. I had decided on calm before I walked off that stage, and I was going to hold it. We had no idea, she said again, and I could hear underneath the repetition the thing she wasn't saying. We had no idea it was like this. We had no idea any of this existed. I know, I said. My father stepped forward. Renata, why didn't you tell us about the nomination? About any of this? I looked at him, at his face, which was honest in its confusion. He genuinely didn't understand, and that was somehow the most painful part of it. Not malice, not cruelty, just a decade of not paying enough attention to know what questions to ask. I did tell you, I said quietly. 5 years ago, I told you I started a company. You said that's a big step and then asked Emilio about his promotion. 4 years ago, I told you we were doing well. 3 years ago, I told you we'd landed our first 6-figure project. 2 years ago, I told you I had 6 employees. My mother's eyes were shining. Her mascara was beginning to blur at the corners. But this, she said, this is a real company. This is... What did you think I did, Mom? I asked gently. Sweep floors? The silence that followed that question was the longest silence of the evening. Excuse me, I said. I need to thank my sponsors. I walked past them. I made it 5 steps before Emilio caught up to me. Renata. He grabbed my elbow. I stopped, turned, looked at his hand on my arm. Don't touch me, I said. Quietly. No heat in it, just a statement. He let go, held both hands up. I didn't know, he said. I didn't know it was this big. I didn't know. You never asked. You never told me. I told you. I told Mom and Dad. At Sunday dinners, for years. I tried to talk about projects and clients and what we were building every time someone changed the subject, every time the conversation moved back to you. His face was red. The complicated red of someone who is simultaneously ashamed and defensive, someone who hasn't yet decided which one to lead with. You always showed up in work clothes, he said. You never talked like someone who was running a company. You never... What did you want me to wear, Emilio? I asked. What would have made you listen? He ran a hand through his hair, looked away. Sophia won't look at me, he said quietly. That's not my problem. So you're just going to... You uninvited me to Thanksgiving, I said. My voice was very quiet now, the quietest it had been all evening. You called my mother and asked her to tell me not to come to a family dinner because my job embarrassed you. My job. The job I built from nothing. The job that pays nearly 3 times what you make. I paused. Yes, Emilio, I'm going to hold that. His jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it. We're done here, I said. I walked away. Behind me, I heard him say my name one more time. I didn't turn around. I reached the bar, ordered a club soda with lime because I had already had enough champagne and I wanted to be clear-headed for whatever came next. Renata. I turned. Sophia was standing behind me, hands clasped together, looking miserable in the specific way of someone who has just understood something they wish they'd understood sooner. Can we talk? She said. Alone? I glanced past her. Emilio was back at table 23 with my parents. All 3 of them were sitting down, not talking to each other, wearing the shared, stunned expression of people waiting for a situation to stop getting worse. Sure, I said. We moved to a quieter section of the lobby, near a row of windows that looked out over the parking lot, the lights of other cars, the dark shapes of trucks, the ordinary night continuing outside. Sophia took a breath. I am so sorry, she said, for not connecting the dots, for not realizing that Kay Ortega was... that you were... She stopped, shook her head. I feel like an idiot. You didn't know, I said, and I meant it. We have different last names, and you had no reason to ask. I should have asked more questions. I was on your job site twice a week for 4 months. I knew you were competent, professional, clearly in charge. I just assumed that I was an employee, I said, not the owner. And she nodded. The look on her face was shame, clear and unguarded. It's not an excuse, but yes. It's not your fault, I said. You're not the first person to make that assumption about a woman on a construction site. You won't be the last. She was quiet for a moment, then, he lied to me. What did he tell you? I asked. About me. She hesitated. I could see her weighing it. Please, I said. I need to know. She exhaled slowly. He called you the family embarrassment. He said you'd never amount to anything, that you were jealous of him, that you resented his success. The words hit the way the words hit when you know somewhere underneath that they might be coming and they land anyway. I kept my face still. I had gotten very good over many years and many job sites and many rooms full of people who underestimated me at keeping my face still. Sophia continued. When he said construction worker, I pictured someone on a crew somewhere. Not someone managing a 19-person operation. Not someone running a project at this scope. She paused. Not someone signing my checks. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. Held it out. When you're ready to talk about finishing the Myers Park project, she said, call me. Professional basis only. A beat. I'm done with Emilio. I took the card. Heavy cream stock, clean type. Sophia Hargrove, independent design consultant. Thank you, I said. You deserve this award, she said. You deserved it 3 years ago. I'm sorry it took this long for the right people to see it. She turned and walked back toward the ballroom. I stood by the window for a moment, holding her card, watching her go. Then I walked to the lobby exit and pushed through the doors into the November night. The air outside hit me like cold water. 46 degrees, clear sky, my breath visible in the glow of the parking lot lights. I had made it halfway across the lot when I heard my mother's voice behind me. Renata, please. I stopped, turned. She was standing at the top of the hotel steps, my father beside her. The light from the lobby was behind them, and in it they looked, smaller than usual. Both of them. My father with his hands in his jacket pockets, my mother with her arms crossed over her chest against the cold, neither of them quite sure what posture was appropriate for this particular moment. Can we take you to dinner? My mother asked. To celebrate? I looked at her. I really looked at her, the way you sometimes have to look at someone you've known your whole life in order to actually see them. She was 61 years old. She had worked as a secretary for 23 years and watched men with less skill and less intelligence move past her into positions she had earned and was never offered. She had pushed her children toward white-collar careers because she believed, with the conviction of someone who had learned it the hard way, that visible professional status was the same thing as security. She had spent 2 decades conflating respectability with worth. She had looked at my work boots and my Carhartt jacket and decided, without asking, that I was struggling. That I was the child who needed worrying about, that I was the one who hadn't quite made it, and in doing that, she had missed the entire thing. No, I said, quietly. But thank you for asking. It was the first time I had ever seen my mother's face fall completely. Not the careful disappointment she managed so well, not the tight-lipped smile that meant she was upset but didn't want to fight. Her face simply fell, like something she had been holding up for a long time had finally gotten too heavy. My father reached over and took her hand. I looked at both of them. I need to go, I said. Good night. And I walked to my truck, unlocked it, climbed in, set the crystal trophy carefully on the passenger seat where it caught the glow from the dashboard lights and held it. I sat there for a full minute, both hands on the wheel, engine idling. 300 people had watched me walk across that stage tonight. My family had been 40 feet away when my name was called. Sophia now understood who I was and what I had built. Emilio had heard, in front of the woman he loved, exactly what his dismissal of me looked like from the outside. None of that was what I had planned. None of it was what I had wanted when I'd gotten dressed in this parking lot 2 hours ago, thinking only about the award, about the work, about what it would mean to be recognized by people who understood the craft. But it had happened, and it was done, and I took a breath and checked in with myself honestly. I was okay. I was more than okay. I put the truck in reverse and drove home. Sunday morning. 3 days after the award ceremony, I was half asleep when my phone buzzed on the nightstand at 6:23. That specific kind of half asleep where you're aware enough to register the sound but not aware enough to make a decision about it. I reached for the phone out of habit, squinting at the brightness of the screen in the dark room. An email. From my father. Subject line, "We owe you an apology." I sat up. I want to be precise about why this stopped me before I had even opened it. Not because an apology from my family was unexpected after what had happened Tuesday night. That was inevitable. I think we all knew that. But because it was from my father. Not my mother, who had always been the one to manage the family's emotional communication, who made the phone calls and sent the birthday texts and smoothed over the rough patches with brunch invitations and careful language. My father, Adrian Ortega, was a man who expressed affection through presence and action rather than words. He showed up. He fixed things. He sat in the same room with you without needing to fill the silence. He had told me he was proud of me exactly twice in my adult life that I could remember. Once when I passed my contractor's licensing exam, and once, briefly, at my community college graduation before I transferred out. Both times, the words had come out a little stiff, like they were words he meant completely but had not practiced saying. He had not signed an email with anything other than, "Dad in years." I opened it. "Renata, I've been trying to write this since Wednesday morning. There isn't a good way to say what I need to say, so I'm just going to say it. We failed you, your mother and I. We assumed, we dismissed, we never asked what you were building because somewhere along the way, we decided we already knew. And we were wrong. We were wrong for a long time. I watched you walk across that stage on Tuesday night and I realized I don't know my own daughter. I don't know what you've built. I don't know what you've survived to build it. I don't know what it cost you to keep showing up to our Sunday dinners for 10 years and listening to us ask about your brother's job while we treated yours like a footnote. I'm ashamed of that. Not embarrassed, ashamed. There's a difference. I am proud of you. I should have told you that 5 years ago when you started the company. I should have told you that every year since. I didn't, and I can't undo that, but I want you to hear it now. I love you. Dad, I read it 3 times. The signature was the thing that got me. Not Adrian, not the kind of formal distance that creeps into family communication over years of careful, surface-level conversations. Dad. I set the phone down on the nightstand and lay back against the pillow and looked at the ceiling for a long time. The room was quiet. Outside, I could hear the neighborhood beginning to stir, a car somewhere, a dog, the distant sound of someone's morning routine already underway. My chest felt tight in a way that wasn't entirely unpleasant. The way it feels when something you've been bracing against for a long time finally stops pressing. I didn't cry. I'm not sure why. I had expected to, reading something like that. Maybe I had spent too many years learning to hold things steady. Maybe I just needed more time. But I lay there in the quiet of my bedroom on a Sunday morning, holding my phone, and I felt the weight of 10 years shift slightly on my shoulders. Not lift, not disappear, shift. At 10:15, a text from Valeria. Can we talk in person? I looked at the message for a long time, the way I had looked at Emilio's Thanksgiving text, weighing it, measuring the distance between what was said and what it meant. Then I typed back, coffee, Thursday, morning grounds on Central, 9 a.m. She replied in under a minute, I'll be there. At 2 p.m, a voicemail notification appeared on my screen. Emilio. I stared at the notification for a full minute. My thumb hovered over the delete button. This was the same brother who had called me the family embarrassment to his girlfriend's face. The same brother who had asked our mother to tell me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving. The same brother who, when confronted Tuesday night, had led with defensiveness before arriving at anything resembling accountability. I pressed play. His voice came through unsteady in a way I had never heard from him before. Emilio had always been the confident one. Easy in social situations, quick with a joke, comfortable in the kind of rooms I had to work to feel comfortable in. The voice in the voicemail belonged to someone who had spent 3 days sitting with something heavy and hadn't found a way to put it down. Renata, it's me. I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, and I don't blame you for that. I need to say this, and I need to say it without expecting anything back from you. I didn't know how big it was. I should have known. I should have asked. I should have paid attention for the last 5 years instead of sitting across the table from you every Sunday and treating your work like it was background noise. I didn't do that. I know I didn't. But here's the thing I keep coming back to, and I need to be honest about it because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve a smooth apology. I think I knew you were doing well. Not the numbers, not the details, but I think somewhere I knew you were building something real. And I think I didn't want to ask because asking would have meant acknowledging it. And acknowledging it would have meant dealing with the fact that my sister, who I spent years thinking of as the one who didn't quite make it, had made it further than me. That's on me. That's not a reason. That's just the truth. Sophia ended things. She said I showed her who I really am. She's right. I'm sorry, Renata. I'm sorry for Thanksgiving. I'm sorry for what I said to Sophia about you. I'm sorry for 10 years of not listening. I don't know if you'll forgive me. I'm not asking you to, not right now. I just needed you to know that I know. I'm sorry. 4 minutes and 22 seconds. I listened to it twice. The second time, I paid attention to the part about knowing, about choosing not to ask because asking would have required him to deal with what the answer revealed. That kind of honesty, the kind that implicates yourself cleanly without softening it into something more forgivable, is harder to dismiss than a straight apology. I had expected a straight apology. I had expected I didn't know. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Clean, efficient, a box ticked, the same energy as his Thanksgiving text. This was something else. I set the phone down on my desk and went back to work. I didn't call him back. I wasn't ready. But I didn't delete the voicemail either. Thursday morning. Morning Grounds Cafe on Central Avenue, the kind of neighborhood coffee shop that has been in the same location for 15 years, exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs on long cords, the smell of espresso, and something with cinnamon baking in the back. The kind of place that feels like it belongs to the people who live nearby, which is why I had chosen it. I arrived at 8:50, ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and found a table by the front window where the morning light came in gray and clean through the glass. My mother arrived at 8:58. She was wearing a gray sweater, dark jeans, minimal makeup. She looked tired in a way that wasn't just physical, the kind of tired that comes from several days of sitting with something you can't resolve by sleeping. She saw me across the cafe and walked over with the careful deliberateness of someone approaching a conversation they've been rehearsing. "Hi, honey," she said quietly. "Hi, Mom." She sat down, set her purse on the floor beside her chair. A server appeared. She ordered a latte, something she usually only got on weekends. A small thing, but I noticed it. When the server left, she wrapped both hands around the menu card on the table, the way you hold something when you need something to hold. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "You asked," I said. I said yes. She nodded. "I don't know where to start." "Start with why," I said. "Why what? Why you never asked, why you dismissed it every time I tried to tell you, why you let Emilio make that phone call and you made it for him." She flinched, not dramatically, just a small tightening around her eyes, the look of someone who has been expecting a specific question and still isn't entirely ready for it when it arrives. The server brought her latte. She wrapped both hands around the cup the way she had wrapped them around the menu card, like she needed the warmth of it or the anchor. "I worked at Hargrove & Ellis for 23 years, she said. I waited. "You know what I did there." "I know." "I answered phones. I managed 6 attorneys' calendars. I knew that office better than any of them did. The clients, the cases, the filing systems, the way things actually ran versus the way they thought they ran." She paused. "In 23 years, I was passed over for the office manager position 4 times. Every time, they promoted someone younger, usually a man, sometimes a woman who had a degree I didn't have. Every time, the partner who told me would say something like, 'You're too valuable where you are,' which is something people say when they want you to stay small without having to admit that's what they want. I had known this. I had grown up knowing this, in the way children absorb the shape of their parents' disappointments before they're old enough to name them. I pushed you and Emilio toward college, toward office jobs, toward careers that came with titles and salaries and structures," she continued, "because I genuinely believed that those things meant safety, that they meant you'd be seen, that you wouldn't end up like me. I'm not like you," I said, and I said it gently, "but not for the reason you thought." She looked at me. "You were afraid construction would trap me," I said. "Physically hard, low paying, no respect, no ceiling to rise to. That's what you pictured when I said trade school. That's what you pictured for the last 10 years every time you asked how's work and moved on before I could answer." "Yes," she said. "That's exactly what I pictured." "And so you stopped looking," I said, "because if you looked and what you saw confirmed what you were afraid of, that would hurt. And if you looked and what you saw was different from what you feared, well, that would mean you'd been wrong for a long time. And that hurts too, in a different way." She was quiet for a moment. Her latte sat untouched. "I stopped looking," she said finally. "You're right. I stopped looking and I told myself I was being realistic and supportive and not putting pressure on you, and the truth is I stopped looking. I needed you to be proud of me," I said. I hadn't planned to say it. It came out the way true things sometimes do, without announcement. Not proud of me in spite of what I chose, proud of the work itself, proud of what I was actually building. Not she turned out fine despite everything. Just proud of the thing I made. My mother's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together, and I watched her work to keep her composure in the careful way of someone who has spent decades being professional in emotional situations. I am proud of you, she said. I am so proud of you. Does that still count? After all of this, does it count now? I looked at her face, the lines around her eyes, the gray at her temples that had spread since I last really looked, the way her hands shook slightly around the coffee cup, not with age, but with the particular tremor of someone who is holding themselves together by a thin margin. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I think it might. She nodded. That's fair. And we sat with that for a moment. Two women at a small table by a window, the morning moving around us, neither of us pretending this was resolved or easy or finished. Then I said, I'll come to Christmas. Her head came up fast. On conditions, I said, non-negotiable ones. Anything, she said immediately. First, if anyone, you, Dad, Emilio, makes a joke about my job or minimizes it or treats it as less than in any way, I leave, and I don't come back to the next one. She swallowed. Okay. Second, if you want to know about my work, ask. Really ask. Not to fill a silence. Not to be polite. Ask because you want to know. Okay. Third, I'm not going to dress differently or talk differently to make anyone at that table more comfortable. This is who I am. My boots, my jacket, my work, my company. If that's acceptable, tell me now. If it's not, tell me that too, and we'll figure out a different arrangement. It's acceptable, she said. Renata, it's more than acceptable. I'm sorry it took a stage and a spotlight for me to understand that. I nodded. And I'm bringing Derek, I said. She blinked. You're my lead carpenter. He's been with me since the first year. He doesn't have family here for the holidays. I watched her face move through something. Surprise, a flicker of something I chose not to name, and then a settling, a decision made. We'd love to have him, she said. I mean that. We finished our coffee, 47 minutes from the time she sat down. When we stood to leave, she hugged me, carefully, like she wasn't sure I would let her. I let her. 2 days after the coffee, I sent an email to my parents. I had written it in 3 drafts over the course of a Thursday evening, sitting at my kitchen table after work, cutting it down each time until what remained was only what needed to be said. Mom and Dad, I'm willing to rebuild this, but I need it to look different than it has. Here is what I'm asking for. 1. If you want me at family events, ask me with enough notice to plan around my schedule. Respect my answer, including when the answer is no. 2. If you want to know about my work, ask. Not as a formality. Ask because you're genuinely interested in the answer. 3. I will not perform a version of myself that makes you more comfortable. I am a contractor. I run a company. I will show up as that person, in the clothes of that person, talking about the work of that person. That is not going to change. If these terms work for you, I'll see you at Christmas. Renata. My father replied first, 40 minutes after I sent it. Agreed. We'll do better. Dad. My mother replied an hour later. Thank you for giving us another chance. We don't deserve it, and we know that. We'll be there. Mom Emilio sent a separate email that evening. Can I call you? I replied, not yet. Give it a few months. He wrote back within the hour. I understand. I'll be here when you're ready. I didn't respond, but I saved the email. Christmas Day fell on a Thursday that year. I drove to my parents' house at noon, Derek in the passenger seat of the Dodge Ram. He had dressed up for the occasion. Dark jeans, a clean flannel, his good boots. He was holding a bottle of wine he'd spent 20 minutes choosing at the store the day before because, as he had explained to me with complete seriousness, you don't show up to someone's Christmas empty-handed, especially when they're your boss's parents and things are already complicated. I had told him the situation. All of it. He had listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I valued most about Derek, and at the end he had said, You want me to come with you? And I had said, I think it would help. And that had been the entire conversation. How are you feeling? He asked as I turned onto my parents' street. Nervous, I said, which is annoying. It's not annoying. It's your family. Same thing, sometimes. He laughed. My parents' house looked the same as it always had at Christmas. Lights along the porch railing, a wreath on the front door, my father's truck parked on the street because my mother's car got the garage. The ordinary, familiar geography of a house you grew up in, which has the particular power of making you feel simultaneously like the adult you are and the child you were, sometimes in the same breath. My mother opened the door before we reached the porch. She was wearing a green sweater I'd seen before, her hair done, a warmth in her face that I recognized as genuine effort. Not performance, but the real thing, someone trying. "Merry Christmas, honey." She hugged me, and this time there was nothing careful or tentative about it. Then she turned. "You must be Derek. I'm Valeria. Come in, please. Come in." Derek shook her hand. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Ortega. These are for you." He handed her the wine. "Call me Valeria," she said, already turning toward the kitchen. "And thank you. This is lovely." Inside, the house smelled like glazed ham and cinnamon rolls and the particular warm smell of a house that has been closed against the cold with people and cooking inside it all morning. My father was in the living room setting up a folding chair. He looked up when I came in and he crossed the room and hugged me. A real hug, the kind he didn't give often, which made it mean more. "Merry Christmas, mija," he said against my hair. "Merry Christmas, Dad." Emilio was on the couch. When I walked in, he stood up. We looked at each other across the living room. My brother in a gray sweater, thinner in the face than I remembered. The easy confidence I associated with him replaced by something quieter, more careful. He didn't smile. I didn't smile. There was too much between us for smiling to cover, and we both knew it. He nodded. A single, honest nod. "I see you. I'm here. I know what I did." I nodded back. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was an acknowledgement that we were both in the room, both willing to be in the room, and that was going to have to be enough for today. We sat down to Christmas dinner at 1 o'clock. 7 people around the extended table. My parents, Emilio, me, Derek, my Uncle Ray, who had driven up from Concord, and my Aunt Patricia, who brought a green bean casserole that she brought every year and that everyone ate politely. The ham was good. The mashed potatoes were lumpy in the specific way my mother's mashed potatoes had always been lumpy, which I had complained about as a child and which now struck me as something close to comfort. We were midway through the meal when my father set down his fork and said, "Renata, how's the Myers Park project coming along?" The table went slightly quiet in the way tables do when someone says something that carries more weight than its surface suggests. I looked at my father. He was looking at me directly, his elbows on the table, his full attention present in a way that Sunday dinners had trained me not to expect. "Really well," I said. "We're finishing the kitchen millwork this week. The Ashworths want to be in by mid-January, and we're going to make that." "That's the historic home," my mother said. "The one from 1912? "Yes, original coffered ceilings, original pocket doors, plaster walls throughout." "The woodwork on something like that," Derek said, and I could hear in his voice the genuine enthusiasm of someone who cares deeply about his craft. "It's not something you can fake. You either match it or you don't, and matching it right takes time." "I'd love to see it," my mother said. "When you're finished, if that's all right, I'd love to come and see what you've built." I looked at her. The ask was real, not polite, not performative. She wanted to see it. "I'd like that," I said. "I'll set it up." Emilio was quiet for most of the meal. He didn't comment on the project. He didn't comment on my work. He didn't deflect to himself. He ate his ham and his lumpy mashed potatoes, and he was simply present. Quiet and present, which was more than I had expected and enough for today. At 3 o'clock, I stood up from the table. "Derek and I are going to head out," I said. My mother looked up, surprised. "Already? We have plans this evening?" We didn't. But I needed to leave on my own terms at a time I had chosen in the way I had decided. That mattered, not as a power move, just as the practice of being someone who knows where her edges are and respects them. My mother walked us to the door. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "Thank you for giving us this." "Thank you for asking about the project," I said. That meant something. She hugged me at the door, and I hugged her back, and this time it felt less like a negotiation and more like what it was supposed to be. Derek and I walked to the truck. "That wasn't so bad," he said. "No," I said. "It wasn't." I started the engine. We pulled out of the driveway and drove through the neighborhood, past the houses with their Christmas lights still on in the afternoon, past the ordinary life of a city that didn't know or care what had just happened at a table inside one of its houses. "It wasn't perfect," I said. "No," Derek agreed, "but it was a start." He nodded. "Yeah, it was a start." Summer arrived the way it always does in Charlotte. Gradually, and then all at once, the humidity settling in like a second skin by the first week of June. I was standing in the skeleton of a new build in South Park on a Tuesday morning, hard hat on, clipboard in hand, watching the framing crew set the last load-bearing wall of a $410,000 custom home. The clients, a couple in their mid-40s relocating from the Northeast, professionals specific about what they wanted, had commissioned a modern farmhouse with clean lines, an open floor plan, and floor-to-ceiling windows in the main living space that would face west for the afternoon light. We had broken ground in March. The framing was running 4 days ahead of schedule. Derek came up beside me, adjusting his tool belt, and looked up at the wall going into place. "Looking good," he said. "Yeah," I said. "We're on track." The clients arrived at 10:30 with their real estate broker, Carol Brennan, who had sent me more work in the last year than I could easily count and who had the focused energy of someone who is always, on some level, doing 3 things at once. "Renata," Carol called across the site, waving. "How's it looking?" "Right on schedule," I said. "Come see." "Go say I walked them through the framing, explaining the structural decisions, pointing out where the window openings would sit, describing what the finished space would feel like when the walls went up and the light started moving through it. The wife stood in the center of what would be the living room and turned slowly, looking at the raw framing around her. "This is going to be something," she said. "Wait until the windows are in," I told her. "You'll understand it then." After they left, I overheard Carol talking to the husband near the site entrance. I wasn't meant to hear it, but the site was quiet and sound carries differently on an open frame. "She's the best in Charlotte," Carol was saying. "My neighbor used her for a full renovation last spring, worth every penny and then some." I didn't let on that I'd heard. I walked back to the site and stayed until 4, checking the plumb on 3 of the exterior walls and reviewing Derek's punch list for the week. Ortega Build and Design had moved into a real office 6 months earlier. Small, 2 rooms on the second floor of a building on Commonwealth Avenue, with a small conference table and a desk for Susan the bookkeeper and a wall I had reserved for project photographs. 68 framed photos now, 1 from each completed project. Some of them I looked at regularly. Some of them I hadn't looked at closely in years, but I knew they were there. On the shelf by the window, in the corner where the afternoon light hit it for about 45 minutes every clear day, sat the Crystal Trophy from November, Charlotte Home Builders Association, Contractor of the Year, under 35. At 4:45 that Tuesday, the light was coming through it at the right angle, throwing small moving rainbows across the wall behind the desk. I stood in the doorway of the office for a moment and looked at them. Then I sat down and went back to work. My mother called on a Thursday afternoon in June, not Sunday. Thursday, 2:15, while I was reviewing invoices at my desk, I picked up. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, honey. How are you?" "Good. Just finished a site walk on South Park. What's up?" "Nothing urgent," she said. "I just wanted to hear your voice." I paused, set my pen down. "How's the South Park project?" she asked. "Good. Framing's done, running ahead of schedule. We start the plumbing rough-in next week. Your father was asking about it. He wanted to know if we could come see it sometime, if that would be all right." I looked out the window. The afternoon light was coming through the trees on Commonwealth Avenue, the particular thick gold of early summer in the South, the kind of light that makes everything look slightly more significant than it probably is. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that. Let me pick a day when the framing really shows, before the drywall goes up. You can see the bones of it." "We'd love that," she said. And then, a beat later, "I told your father what you said, about the bones of old houses, about how the bones are what you're really building around." "What did he say?" "He said he wished he'd asked you about it years ago." I didn't say anything for a moment. There was something in that, something that would have broken me open at a different point in my life, that I was able now to simply hold. Not fix, not resolve, just hold. "We'll pick a day," I said. We talked for 12 minutes. She asked about the permit inspection schedule. She asked whether the clients were happy with the progress. She asked if I'd had lunch, which made me smile because some things don't change and maybe aren't supposed to. "I'll let you get back to work," she said finally. "I love you, honey." "Love you too, Mom." I held the phone for a moment after she hung up. Then I set it down on my desk, next to the invoice stack and the scheduling binder and the coffee cup that had been cold for an hour, and I sat there in the quiet of my office on a Thursday afternoon and felt something I had been waiting a long time to feel without knowing I was waiting for it. Not vindication, not victory, not even forgiveness exactly. That was still a longer road, and I knew it. Something more like seen, finally, plainly, without a stage and a spotlight required. Just seen. That evening, I sat in my truck in the parking lot of my office building after everyone else had gone home. Engine off, windows down. The sun was going down behind the tree line to the west, painting the sky in the particular layered colors of a southern summer evening. Amber at the horizon, deepening through orange and rose to a blue overhead that was almost purple. Through the office window, I could see the crystal trophy on the shelf. I sat there and I thought about all of it. I thought about the phone call in November. My mother's careful voice, the words blue collar that she didn't say, but I heard anyway, standing in my kitchen in my Carhartt jacket with drywall dust on my jeans and a blister on my palm. I thought about Thanksgiving alone at the job site, sitting on the front porch steps eating pad see ew and watching the sun come through the bare trees and feeling, unexpectedly, almost against my will, free. I thought about the award ceremony, my name on the screen, the way Sophia's hand had gone to her mouth, the way Emilio's face had drained of color, the way my mother's champagne glass had frozen halfway to her lips. I thought about the walk across that stage, and the weight of the crystal in my hands when James Whitfield placed it there, and the microphone in front of me, and 300 people looking at me, and the single breath I had taken before I spoke. I thought about my father's email. I am proud of you. I should have told you that 5 years ago. I thought about coffee with my mother and the way she had said, "Does that still count?" Her face completely open for the first time in as long as I could remember, asking a real question and genuinely not knowing the answer. I thought about Christmas dinner and my father asking about Myers Park and actually waiting for the answer. I thought about my mother saying I'd love to see it sometime. Small things, new things. I thought about Emilio's voicemail, which was still in my phone unsaved. I would probably call him eventually. Not yet, but eventually. Because he had told me the truth about himself in that voicemail. The uncomfortable, unflattering truth. And that was worth something. I didn't know yet exactly what it was worth, but it was worth something. Here is what I know now that I didn't know a year ago. Or rather, that I knew but hadn't finished learning. The work was always enough. It was enough before anyone recognized it, before the award, before the night in the ballroom when everything broke open and rearranged itself. I built 68 homes before anyone in my family asked me about a single one of them, and every one of those homes was exactly what it was, regardless of whether anyone who shared my last name understood it. The work was always enough, but being seen, that matters too. Not for the work's sake, for your own. You can spend a decade building in silence and building well, and the silence doesn't diminish the work, but it does ask something of you that it shouldn't have to ask. It asks you to sustain yourself entirely on your own belief in what you're doing, with no reflection, no witness, no one at your table on a Sunday who says, "Tell me more." Most people can't do that indefinitely. I did it for 10 years, and I'm not sure it made me stronger. I think it just made me lonelier than I needed to be. What I would tell someone younger, someone standing where I stood at 21 with a decision in front of them and a table full of people looking at them like they were making a mistake: do the work. Do it with everything you have. Build the thing you want to build, the way you want to build it, to the standard you set for yourself and not the one that earns someone else's approval. Show up at 6 a.m. and stay until the job is done and care about every detail that nobody else will ever notice and care about it anyway. And also, don't mistake silence for acceptance. Don't assume that the people who aren't asking are okay with the answer. Sometimes they're afraid of it. Sometimes they don't know how to ask. Sometimes they need something to break open before they can see what was in front of them all along. You don't have to wait for the stage and the spotlight. You can just say, "This is what I've built. Do you want to see it?" And if they say yes, show them everything. I started the truck. The radio came on low. I backed out of the parking space and pulled onto Commonwealth Avenue, the evening light behind me, the familiar streets of Charlotte moving past the windows. 89,000 miles on the odometer. 5 years of job sites and client meetings and Sunday dinners and a Thanksgiving. I spent alone and a November night that changed something I hadn't even known needed changing. My hands, calloused, strong, mine, rested easy on the wheel. They didn't invite me to Thanksgiving because they were ashamed of who I was. Now they call on Thursdays because they want to know what I'm building. It took longer than it should have. It cost more than it should have cost. But we got there. And that, after everything, is enough. Thank you so much for spending this time with me and with Renata's story. If something in this story moved you, if you've ever felt unseen by the people who were supposed to see you most, know that you are not alone in that, and that what you're building matters even before anyone else understands it. If this story reached you, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next, and leave a comment. I read every single one. Tell me what part stayed with you. Tell me your city. Tell me your story. I'll be listening.